Welcome to the Spark It podcast, where we bring you inspiring conversations that spark your interest to do more or keep the conversation going. Today, on the anniversary of South Sudan's independence, we reflect on a journey marked by struggle, resilience, and hope. From decades of civil war and displacement to a hard won vote for freedom in 2011, South Sudan's history is one of resilience and strength. And joining us is Emmanuel. Let's call him our in house political analyst and a South Sudanese national who walks us through what independence meant and means, the human cost behind it, and the ongoing fight for peace and rebuilding. He's also the host of Concerned Podcast, and please follow him on all social media platforms at the Concerned Podcast. Happy Independence Day to all our South Sudan fans from the Sparkit Podcast. Emmanuel, welcome to the Sparkit Podcast once again. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Kimaru. I'm happy to be here, this Packet podcast, and I'm excited that South Sudan is making 14 years old. Exciting
Mhm.
one. Yeah.
I know that's honestly exciting. South Sudan is one of the youngest nations, and I would like us to, I would like for you to walk us through the journey to independence for South Sudan, as from your point of view, especially because you are from South Sudan. I believe you have stories for days. And yeah, so would you probably just give us like a breakdown of what that looked like for South Sudan, maybe from the time before it actually broke into South Sudan, there was Sudan, and then there was the fight for freedom for South Sudan. How did this journey look like for South Sudan before they even got their independence? Maybe give us like a little bit of a history lesson.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks so much, Kimaru, again, and all our viewers for this Packet podcast. South Sudan is making 14 years old today. Gained our independence on 9 of July 2011 through a hard-fought struggle. And the journey of South Sudan, I think, would best be dated back in the years of 1955. That's even before that, in about 1899, and that is when Sudan used to be one. That is the Republic of Sudan, which was put under the Anglo-Egyptian rule, which is also known as the Condominion rule. So in 1899, that is when the Egyptians and the British established the condominion rule in Sudan, where they administered Sudan as one country. However, Sudan was just administered as a one country, but in practice, the country was treated like as two different countries because we had the northern part and then the southern part. The northern part was mainly or predominantly Arabs and Muslims, whereas in the southern part we have some African ethnic groups and mainly which some of them are Christians and others have their African traditions. They practice their African tradition. So when the Anglo-Egyptian rule was established in 1899, and then after that, in about in about 1955, that is when the British decided that they now want to grant Sudan independence. And then the following year, in 1956, that was when the British left, and then they gave Sudan independence. And then in January, I think that's when Sudan gained independence. But as I say that the condominion rule, when it was established, it didn't actually administer Sudan in an equal way, in an equally fair manner, because there was even a kind of division within Sudan, whereby the Egyptians and the British they treated the Sudanese people differently. The people in the north were given all privileges. They had all the infrastructures. They had the political power, and then the southern people, on the other hand, they were neglected most of the time, marginalized, no proper schools, no proper hospitals. And therefore, that angered the people of the southern part of Sudan. That's why in 1955, Sudan went into independence when the country was already had like conflict within itself. The Southerners were not feeling that their demands were heard. Their demands were actually given to them. So that is when they went into civil war. The first civil war that happened was from 1995 to 1955 rather to 1972, when the Addis Ababa Agreement was formed. And then after the Addis Ababa Agreement was formed, calm returned a little bit, but just a few years later on, the country again went back to the second civil war, which started in 1983. And this civil war was brought to an end through the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement, which is also known as the Naivasha Accord, that was signed in Kenya in 2005. And when the Naivasha Accord was signed, it actually guaranteed that the southern part of Sudan would be run as an independent, as an autonomous state, and a province, an autonomous province. And also, the Naivasha Accord gave uh, the southern Sudanese people the opportunity that after 6 years they will go for referendum that will determine their fate. That's why from 2005, after 6 years, that was in 2011, the country went for referendum in January, and that same year, when the referendum was conducted, majority of South Sudanese decided that they want to be a country of their own. Over 98% of the people of Southern Sudan voted for cessation. They voted for separation, where they separated from the northern part of Sudan, and that is when the country called South Sudan came into existence on the 9th of July 2011. So that is briefly the way of independence, or the way to independence of South Sudan.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that breakdown. For people who didn't know about South Sudan, I believe they have a little bit of lessons. So it looks like the comprehensive peace agreement that was signed here in Kenya, in Naivasha, as you mentioned, was sort of like the biggest turning point for South Sudan, because it kind of marked their road to independence at this point. Could you probably tell us a little bit about the role, like John Garang before his death? What was the role that he played in all these?
I think that is really one of the biggest contributors towards the
Mm-hmm,
independence of South Sudan. Garang was a very visionary leader, that he wasn't only so much looking at, he actually had a vision of having the United Sudan, but later on, when um, the Northerners were having mistreating the Southerners so much, that is when he had to decide and go for actually champion the separation of South Sudan. But the major role that Garang played was mainly during the Second Civil War that happened in 1983, which is also known as
mm-hmm,
the SPLM War, or the Anyanya Two War.
mm-hmm,
So in 1983, in 1972 rather, when the Addis Ababa Agreement was signed, that brought an end to the first civil war. The
mm-hmm,
leader of Sudan by then, called Nimeri, he actually broke the peace deal. He broke the peace deal. He imposed Sharia law, where
mm-hmm,
he declared Sudan to be like an Islamic state, and also he declared Arabic to be the official language of the country. Yet the southern people were not familiar with that. What Garang did was that he actually was the person who led the country through the second civil war, that of 1983 to 2005. He was the
mm-hmm,
one who championed that war, and he was really a very visionary leader that up to now, so many people still believe that it was through his efforts that the country actually got independent. So Garang labored a lot. He labored so much towards the independence of the country. He went and signed. I mean, he went and started the civil war that liberated the country from the north. And also, one of the major contributions that he has done was, of course, the CPA, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. It was
mm-hmm,
during that Comprehensive Peace Agreement that gave South Sudan a starting point to be an independent country, and he contributed so much toward that peace agreement. Just after signing the peace agreement, when he returned back a few months, that is when he died, unfortunately. Something that so many people didn't actually expect or didn't wish to happen. And yeah, that is mainly his contribution. He was the one behind the Second Civil War, the Anyanya War, the SPLM War that was in 1983, and that came to an end through the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, or the Naivasha Accord of 2005. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so after he dies, that's where we transition to President Salva Kiir. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, before we even get to Salva Kiir, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right.
Yeah,
So
called Alpha
you
Yeah.
did you did talk about like the two civil wars that happened, and I, from my research and also what you're talking about, it looks like it lasted for way too long. Like it wasn't really, it was too long, honestly. And of course, with such a thing comes, like there is the cost of human life, the displacement, and people becoming refugees. Yeah, could you probably tell us a little bit more how these two civil wars have contributed to people being, I would call it generations of marginalization and people ending up in camps, and generally how this has affected people from the south?
Yeah, just like any other civil war, of course, when there is war in any place in the world,
Mm-hmm,
it actually sparks in refugee crisis, and
mm-hmm,
it leads to loss of life, property, and destruction of infrastructures. And the civil war in Sudan was not exceptional. So when the war started, of course, so many people lost lives, and right away from the first one, that was when so many people went into refugee camps. Some went to Uganda, some went to Kenya, others to Ethiopia. And yeah, some of our parents went during that time. They grew up in the refugee camp, and
mm-hmm,
when the war stopped, that was when some of them came back home. But again, it didn't actually last. It didn't last for so long. Again, when the other war started, the one that recently started. So from the first civil war that started from 1995, from 1955 to 1983, of course, it forced so many people to leave the country. As I
mm-hmm,
said, so many went and sought refuge in Kenya, in Uganda, and even some went as far as to some of the Western countries. They went there and went into exile, and some never went back to South Sudan. They actually lived here. They born their children here, and yeah.
mm-hmm,
And then the second civil war again, it just like the first one, it also claimed so many lives. Guess like over
mm-hmm,
2 million people died, and other millions of people again were injured and displaced. So just like any other war that happens in the world, yeah, so many people lost their lives. Others were displaced, forced to go and stay in countries that they were not born in, and forced to live under abnormal circumstances which they didn't expect in life.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's really, really sad because I do have friends who have told me about the experiences. And also, Patrick, the co host at the Sparkit podcast, he previously talked about his experience also being born in a refugee camp, and also his grandparents having to have been refugees, his parents at some point. So it looks like for most South Sudanese nationals, it's like became like a cycle of events that keep repeating themselves, and it's such a sad thing to have to go through. It's, I would think of it like in the context of also creating generational traumas where kids cannot stay grounded, and then they grow up, and maybe their children have to go through the same thing, and that is the cost of war, which is particularly a very sad thing for people to have to go through. Interesting. You talked about now South Sudan now getting their independence from the north. You were given a 6 years transition from 2005 so that you can get to vote in a referendum, uh, to probably either continue being part of the north or now become a fully fledged country. What did that look like for Sudan nationals? Like in the context of, was there like anticipation for these? Is this something that like they looked forward to? And could you probably just give us a rundown? And for you, for example, did you get to witness this happen in real time? Give us a rundown of how this looked like for people in South Sudan.
Oh yeah, I think when independence, I mean when the referendum was held,
Mhm,
I was at tender age. I wasn't so much into. into politics, and I was really not so much concerned about issues to do with
Mhm.
South Sudan. I was just that young, and but one moment that I can recall is that um, when the I think it got me when I was, if I wasn't in Juba, I was in Yei. I can't remember exactly, but I remember that night when the results of the referendum were called and declared, and then
Mhm.
they declared that the separation was the South Sudanese actually won, where they would become a country of their own. uh, I remember that night, like majority of people in the place that I lived in, they marched on the street. They went to one of the biggest, it's called like Freedom Square. They were
Mhm.
beating drums, they were dancing and making ululation, and everywhere like you'd see that there was excitement in every person, and this was
Mhm.
because so many South Sudanese, they lived under terrible conditions. They lived under marginalization. So many of them were marginalized during the era when they used to be a Sudan. So many of them couldn't like have their demands, their voices heard. So they were
Mhm.
hoping that by having a different country, by having a separate country of their own, all the challenges that they were facing when they used to be in Sudan would actually come to stand still. And that was the
Mhm.
hope that every single South Sudanese had in mind in 2011. There was so much excitement. There was so much jubilism. People actually were setting tears of joy because they hoped that for the first time they will become first citizen in their own country. They will be valued. For those who have always spent their lifetime outside the country, they hope that they will come back home and actually settle and stay in their country where their parents and their ancestors were born. So that was the hope that every single South Sudanese had in their mind. And just
Mhm.
from the declaration of the results, you could just see the excitement in every person that time, marching on the street, dancing, singing songs of freedom, and people were shooting like they were firing gunshots, not as a sign of maybe conflict or war, but that was like
Mhm.
as a last bullet towards that would actually be fired in the country. So that was a symbolic sign, but
Wow.
unfortunately that did not live for long. That again the country went back to civil war. But from 2011, people had the excitement in them. They hoped that for the first time, they will be considered as first class citizens. They will have country of their own,
Mhm.
that they will be the one to manage. Yeah, that was
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
excitement that people had.
Wow. That, yeah, that I mean that must have felt really good after all these years of having to fight and getting displaced and not having sort of a voice. It definitely marked a new beginning for South Sudan and the people of South Sudan. And you talked about like people, opportunities, their voices being heard before the next now whatever displacement or civil war happened, because there was a bit of I think people got to enjoy at least 2 years or so of some peace and tranquility in South
Exactly.
Sudan. Yeah, what do you think were like the opportunities that opened up for people in South Sudan? Because I would say for Kenyans there was a bit of mass exodus to South Sudan to set up
Yeah,
businesses. Yeah.
that's right. Uh, you know, um, people always see opportunities in uh, in this new country,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a country that has just gotten its independence, and they lack so much in terms
Mm-hmm.
of human power. I mean, like human resource. So we do have like people from other countries that are kind of established, like Kenya, Uganda, and the surrounding countries. So they were looking at so many opportunities in this new country, and that's why so many of them came in, because they knew this is a country that has just gained independence. Probably
Mm-hmm.
they want to have like that enough capacity to do things by their own. So many Kenyans, so many Ugandans, Ethiopians, they came into this country to establish their own businesses, but also to just support this country grow. So the
Mm-hmm.
country offered so many opportunities, not only to its citizens at the start, but also to nationals from the neighboring countries. And then for the first time, people were seeing in the first few years that from 2012, 2011, kids were going to school and hospitals were getting built and roads were
Mhm.
constructed, and
Mhm.
there was, you could see that there was really hope in this country. So the opportunities that this country, I mean, people expected in this country were so much. Were actually
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
many opportunities were on the way. But just as I
Mhm.
said, that the peace actually didn't live for long. Just in a period of about 2 years, that is when the country again went into civil war within itself.
Mhm.
Just after
Mhm.
separation, and that makes people ask you so many questions. What was the
Mhm.
problem? The problem was not Sudan then. The problem was ourselves. So because
Mhm.
just in a period of less than 3 years, the
Mhm.
country was again plunged into civil war, which was really,
Mhm.
really unfortunate. But there were so many opportunities that the country offered, not only to its citizens, but even to people from the neighboring countries, just like you mentioned, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and even people from other countries and other Western countries. They saw opportunity in this country. They came in, they
Mhm.
established, but so many of them again went back when the war broke out in
Mhm.
2013. Yeah.
Wow. I think from what you're talking about, I feel like a lot of African countries have gone through it. It's almost the same with when the British came and conquered, and then they left. Self governance has always sort of had, especially during that transition period. I feel like
Right.
most countries went through that. Like you feel like we are fighting for something. This is what you want, or this is what we need, and then the moment there is that transition, the people who are placed in power, sometimes either they just something happens. And I feel like from the context of also South Sudan, it takes for a selfless leadership to transition a country into sort of stability. And I feel like for you, in South Sudan, you didn't get to experience that for long. It was like 2 years later, again, people are plunged into a civil war. For example, before we even continue now to what happened now in 2013, what did independence mean maybe for exactly for like your family? What are those stories that maybe your parents or people in your family or your community talk about that sort of stand out for you, knowing now that they had already gone through this whole ideal of like, oh, they don't have self-governance, they have been displaced for the longest, they have been fighting for, for their own independence. What's the like that one thing that stands out that maybe somebody has told you or you know about?
One thing that I want to say about is that, as I said, when Sudan used to be one, um,
Mm-hmm.
the southern part of Sudan was really was not so much valued. And in
Mm-hmm.
terms of education, as I said, uh, the people from the southern parts didn't get really the opportunity to go to school and get to learn so much, even about the importance of having like a sovereign country like South Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
to so many of our parents who just witnessed the challenges of being in the Sudan, when they were told that uh, they are going to separate from Sudan, all they had in their mind is that once they have a country of their own, all the
Mm-hmm.
challenges that they were going through, things to do with marginalization, things to do with forced labor, these things were happening. Things to do
Mm-hmm.
with like you're forced to participate in a religion or denomination that is not yours, to speak in language that is not yours. They had in
Mm-hmm.
mind that from the time when South Sudan will be a country of its own, all the things that were happening in the then Sudan would stop. So that was what
Mm-hmm.
was in their mind. But also, there was a hope in our parents that when they actually get a country of their own, this is going to be the last time that they will hear sounds of gunshots and all the things that they used to hear. That will be the last time that they will go and again settle in a country, I mean, in the neighboring country, but they will stay in their own country. So these were things that were in the mind of our parents. They were expecting
Mm-hmm.
their kids to go to school and attain education and change their lives in future. They're expecting to go to hospitals that are built within the south. They were expecting to travel in roads that are decent. So that was mainly what was in the mind of our parents by that time. Though they didn't go to school, but
Mm-hmm.
just the challenges that they were going through in the post South Sudan or during the war actually just gave them a very brief summary of what a new South Sudan would be for them. So
Mm-hmm.
it's mainly that the challenges that they went through actually uh, made them think that when they have a separate country of their own, all the challenges that they went through would be history. So that was mainly what was in the mind of our parents. But to me, as an individual, I later got to learn that about when I learned about the history of my country, because I was
Mm-hmm.
introduced to the history of South Sudan when I was in about Form 2. That was when I started learning about the history of South Sudan. So interesting, and I really I've learned that our founding fathers, people like Dr. John Garang de Mabio, who died, they really had a vision for the country. They had a
Mm-hmm.
vision, a very big vision for the country. And I have a feeling that if he didn't die that early, the story of South Sudan would be totally different. The story of
Mm-hmm.
South Sudan would be totally different, and that even within just this shortest time period from 2011, South Sudan would have been in a very good position by now. So
Mm-hmm.
our independence was, I would say, it was really hijacked by the death of Dr. John Garang. Very
Mm-hmm.
passionate guy. He was so much in love with the people of South Sudan, and he was just a very good leader. So many people praise him. And when you go across the country, he is one of the founding fathers of the country, and he's spoken so much about being uh, the founding father of South Sudan. So yeah, independence meant a lot to so many South Sudanese, but just like
Mm-hmm.
as I said, it didn't work the way people thought, like people expected. Things changed just within a very short time,
Mm-hmm.
in a period of less than 3 years. Things changed completely, and people got back to where they were. So unfortunate. Yeah.
Wow. I can imagine the excitement during the independence and people. And I believe there was also a mass exodus of people from camps, like going back to South Sudan, because I mean, we've gotten our freedom, we've regained our country back, we can go
Yeah.
and start rebuilding. So I imagine you have already started rebuilding, and then 2 or 3 years into it, you have to go back to scratch. Could you take us through that particular moment in 2013? What, for somebody who might not know, what really happened in 2013 that probably took, the country back into chaos?
Um, as I said, I would say the issue that started in 2013, I would say it wouldn't have happened if Dr. John Garang was still alive. But
Mm-hmm.
what happened in 2013 was mainly a result of lack of trust that happened during the liberation. Because when the country got the independence in 2011,
Mm-hmm.
actually before the country went into independence in 2010, the country, the whole of Sudan, the southern part of Sudan as an autonomous state went for election. There was an election that was held in 2010. And
Mm-hmm.
during that election, the current president, Salva Kiir Mayardit, was elected as the president and Dr. Machar as his vice president. And
Mm-hmm.
this was actually the leaders that took the country into independence in 2011. Just in 2010, we went for the
Mm-hmm.
election, and then the following year, the country went into referendum. So when Kiir was elected as the president, he formed his cabinet just like any other president would do, and then
Mm-hmm.
Machar was his vice. So unfortunately, I think there was some kind of leaked information where the president leaked that the vice president, Dr. Machar, together with some cabinet, top-ranking cabinet officials, ministers, and some army generals, they were actually plotting a coup against him. They wanted to
Mm.
overthrow him.
Oh,
So what
well.
he did was that he had to make a counter response. Before that happened, what he did was that he sacked the whole cabinet. He sacked his vice president. He removed his vice
Mm-hmm.
president Machar. He removed the ministers and all other suspected army officials that they were suspected to be the one plotting the coup.
Mhm.
So that incident alone, that 2013 government reshuffle, changed the whole story of the country. So after a few months after the sacking, uh, the vice president Machar, of course, he defected. He went into the bush. He defected, and then he went and came back again and attacked the president. He came and attacked the forces loyal to the president, and that is where the civil war started from 2013.
Mhm.
It was just because the vice president who felt that he had labored so much towards the independence of the country, that he fought so much to liberate the country from oppression, was not
Mhm.
entitled to be the vice president of South Sudan. So that was where
Mhm.
the problem started from. That perception that since he fought in the struggle, he's entitled to be the vice president of South Sudan. That was the whole thing that started the fight in 2013. And from there, we went in 2014. The fighting continued. Some kind of agreement was reached, but it didn't last for long. Again, in 2016, the country went back
Mhm.
into war. And finally, in 2018, again, they had to go to Addis Ababa and attain what we call the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan. They signed that agreement that again brought back the vice president Machar as the vice president
Mhm.
and other deputy vice president. So yeah, the problem that the country is grappling with right now started in 2013. That was when the president sacked his vice president and then some cabinet and also members of the army. So from there, they defected and they came and attacked the forces loyal to the president, and that's where the fighting escalated to most parts of the country in 2016, and so many people were killed, others displaced, others internally, and others to the neighboring countries. That's where the problem started.
Wow. That's a really sad thing. Um Okay, so this particular conflict between the president and the vice president at the time is definitely what caused this now civil war post independence.
Right.
Do you think, in your own opinion, now, since especially 2011 to right now in 2025, whatever has been happening in South Sudan, the displacement and all that, apart from that particular conflict, does it continue to be fueled by ethnicity, or it's just the rift between the two?
Uh, you know, um, I think people, just like as I said, that
Mm-hmm.
what is happening in the country can be dated back to during the war.
Yeah.
Um, During the war in 1991, uh, just like in Kenya, in South Sudan,
Mm-hmm.
we do have like so many tribes. We have like
Yes.
64 tribes in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority, the major tribes in the country are the Nuers and the Dinkas.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the president of the country happens to come from the Dinka tribe. The
Mm-hmm.
vice president happens to come from the Nuer tribe. And historically, there was an incident that in 1991 that happened whereby it was claimed, I can't, I'm not giving it as my opinion, but that's what I read in the
Mm-hmm.
history about my country, that the vice president, Dr. Machar, had actually participated in what we call like in massacre of some Dinkas. That was in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think right from that time, and also there were some claims that Machar at some point wanted to betray the struggle. He was so much allied to the people in the north. And there
Mm-hmm.
left some kind of distrust. So many people, Kir and others, were not even trusting him. So when the vice president was sacked in 2013, at some point, because he feel that the president is from Dinka, so I think there was that feeling that maybe
Ah.
it was Dinkas against the Nuers because the vice
Mm.
president happens to come from Nuer and the president from Dinka. So people could just have that conclusion that it's like a kind of ethnic fight. But I think that
Mm-hmm.
also that belief had to spread among even members of these communities, and they had to live with that belief that this is a reality, that it is not even a fight between maybe like power, but it is an ethnic tribe. So,
Mm-hmm.
and this perception led into targeted killing. Even in 2013, there was a genocide, some kind of genocide, but like a mass murder of people from a specific tribe in 2013, from the Nuer tribe that happened in the in 2013 in the country. So,
Mhm.
whereas I won't say so much that it was an ethnic conflict in the country, but people had that in mind. People
Mhm.
believe that and that is mainly defined because the president happens to come from the Dinka and the vice president happens to
Mhm.
come from the Nuer. So many people think it was a Dinka Nuer kind of conflict. But yes, whether that might be also a factor that contributed, but there were so many factors that contributed to it. So many other factors. But yes,
Mhm.
I wouldn't conclude that the fight that happened in 2013 it was an ethnic kind of war because
Mhm.
even the other tribes among the 64 that actually participated in it, other tribes were uh, uh, at the side of the vice president and others at the side of the president.
Mhm.
So yeah, and that makes me to have a conclusion that it wasn't so much an ethnic kind of confrontation,
Mhm.
but though it contributed because it wasn't purely the Dinkas and the
Mhm.
Nuer fighting, but it, even the Dinkas had people from other tribe. The Dinkas had Nuer on the other side, and the Nuer had Dinkas from
Mhm.
that side. So it was
Okay.
a kind of just political kind of fighting because of ideological differences, but also because the vice president felt that he was removed from the position where he's supposed to be serving in. Yeah.
Wow. That's an interesting take. Okay. Post that war, how does peace look like for the average person in South Sudan? Would you say, like right now, living in Juba feels safe, for example, or
You know,
living in South Sudan? Mm-hmm.
that depends on what you call safety or what you
Mm-hmm.
define safety because one yes if one would say of course Juba is safe right now because there are thousands of people living in Juba and they are surviving.
Mm-hmm.
They go to sleep, they wake up good, they go to their work, they come back home, they eat, they sleep. So one would say that uh, there is safety, a kind of safety in Juba, but to someone who looks so deeper into uh, um, the word safety, including other aspects, then I would say there's no so much safety in Juba because if for me the word safety to me doesn't only mean like maybe leaving home, coming back home safe and staying, but it includes going out there and just going out saying what I want, what my mind tells me, sharing my
Mm-hmm.
ideas,
Mm-hmm.
my opinions, and I feel that there's nothing that's going to happen to me when I go on the street. The government try to do something and I have my opinion about it, maybe in a written form, posted on social media freely, or through an opinion on newspaper, or go on national TV and speak about it, or on the radio speak about it. I come home and sleep well. There's nothing that happens to me. If that is
Mm-hmm.
what we call safety, then I feel there is no safety in Juba. But if it means going out and just sleep, come and eat, go out, yes, there is safety. But it depends on what you define safety. So to me,
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about uh, just having the, how do I call it, the ordinary life, yes, there is
Mm-hmm.
safety to some extent. But
Mm-hmm.
going into it deeply,
Yeah.
it's life is not that so much secure yet in the country. Even
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
don't know what tomorrow holds. Like they will still go, but they really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So peace is, it's just very thin back home. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. So you would actually agree that there are some certain levels of freedoms that people still don't experience at this point.
Oh yeah, of course. Yes, but yeah, just like in so many countries,
Mm-hmm.
people always have, like, governments have, they just have their fears. And
Mm-hmm.
and I really don't I don't want to maybe put so much blame on the government because apparently that's a stage where every country has to go through. When a
Mm-hmm.
country has
Mm-hmm.
just gained independent, it will take so many years for a country to attain its full democratic principle. If you
Yeah.
want to be a democracy,
Mm-hmm.
for the country to reach an extent where they care less about what people post against people in power, go and
Mm-hmm.
speak against people. It takes so many years. It doesn't just come like just like in a very short time. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So what is happening back home today? Whereas I would say maybe the government doesn't avail all kind of liberties to its people, but that is just a stage of a growth
Mm-hmm.
of of every country. So it happens like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even these countries that today we see as the mothers of democracy around the world, at some point they went through that stage where they just don't want to someone to go out there and speak anything recklessly about
Mm-hmm.
them. No. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is the country is just in a stage of growth. That's what I would say. And with time, we'll have
Mm-hmm.
all the liberties that people want. Obviously, that is when we have uh, a new crop of people who know what it means to just give someone freedom to go and express themselves, speak their mind out there. When we have people, like-minded people who believe that someone who comes out and criticize my action is not actually my enemy, but is just sharing his opinions on how things are supposed to be run, then
Mm-hmm.
that's when I would say we have like a dream country. Yeah, but at this extent, I don't want to put blame so much on the government that they are not
Mm-hmm.
availing all liberties to its citizen. But as I say, it's just a stage of growth of any state.
Mm-hmm.
So with time, we will get there.
Yeah. I like the fact that you admit that to get there, it's sort of like a journey, because I feel like after all the conflict and all that, it means at some point there's even some levels of distrust. And to have autonomy of opinion would, as you've said, it would definitely take time for you not to get to a place where you are judged because you said something that sounds like not everybody agrees with it. And I mean, that can really be backed up by what people have already been through. You see so much throughout your lifetime that sometimes it informs how you do things, how you say things, and things like that. As a South Sudanese national who is in the diaspora right now, what would you say, for example, how has the conflict in South Sudan over the years, for example, shaped the identity of people living in the diaspora?
Um, you know, Majority, I would
Sorry.
say, not even in the diaspora, but back
Mm-hmm.
home. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in every maybe in um in every 10 South Sudanese that you meet on the street, just not even in South Sudan, when you go on the streets of Nairobi, and
Mm-hmm.
just maybe in every 10 South Sudanese that you get, at least nine of them will identify as refugees. Nine of them might
Mm-hmm.
identify as refugees. And yes, um, I know so many people attributes the country to being a war-torn country where it's known for for conflict. That's what so many people know South Sudan for, and it's not even surprising that there are so many people who actually don't know that there exists a country called South Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
It's very funny that so many people don't know that there's a country called South Sudan because it just gained independence. People would know that there's a country called Sudan. When you say Sudan, some people
Mhm,
have knowledge about it, but South Sudan, less people do have knowledge about it. But
mhm,
yes, staying outside South Sudan, obviously, um, it won't just make someone maybe less identify as South Sudan, I mean,
mhm,
as South Sudanese. Of course, I might be a Canadian right now, but I fully understand where my roots are, right? So
mhm,
I
mhm,
know where I was born. Many of the years I lived back home in my own country, and therefore it will be a betrayal for me to identify as a Canadian and not as a South Sudanese at some point. Yes, I would
mhm,
identify as a Canadian, but in because I lived majority of my years, many of my years I lived back home. So yeah, I identify as South Sudan. But also I just want people to know that South Sudan is not just identified by conflict, right? There are so
mhm,
many people who are passionate about building a country that respects the rule of law, a country that trails on peace, a country that everyone wants to live in. So whereas so many people might know South Sudan for being a country that has always been in war for many years, they should
Mhm.
also know that, just like in any country, there are people who are passionate about building the country. So we do have young people right now, and I'm seeing it happening all over. I can see it on social media. People who are not so much attached to the conservative way of how they are supposed to behave. People,
Mhm.
those who grew up during the war, they always have a mentality of solving every problem through conflict, which is not the way. I mean, there's so many ways where we could resolve problem when it happens, and I am seeing that there's so many young people right now who are passionate about that, who actually have shown that when there is a problem, they can rather ought to solve it in a better way. They don't,
Mhm.
in most cases, identify themselves based on ethnic lines. Yes, it is good to identify yourself based on your ethnic group. That is your pride. You should be proud of where you come from, but that shouldn't be a basis of your life in the country. You shouldn't be living
Mhm.
on the basis of ethnicity, right? You should just
Yeah.
recognize that yes, I am from this tribe, but that shouldn't really impact the way how you relate with other people. So
Mhm.
important. What is important is that you put the country first, put on some other things that can take the country ahead. Ethnicity is just one strength that the country have, means that we have a diversity of people, and when we have a
Mhm.
diversity of people in a country, we have different cultures. When we have different cultures, we have people behaving in different ways, and they have new and different ideas, and all this can contribute toward building a country. That is one thing that
Mhm.
people should identify.
Mhm.
I mean, they should know about ethnicity. It doesn't really have to be a factor that takes us back, as the case it is back home and in other countries. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. I want to give you a break. You've really talked. So I'll give people general facts or historical facts about South Sudan. So South Sudan is one of the youngest nations, and it gained its independence in July 9th in 2011. So the independence vote in 2011 was conducted, and over 98% of South Sudanese voted for independence in a referendum. They really wanted to break from the north and, have autonomy over their own country and grow and rebuild. And it also became the 55th African country and the 193rd member of the United Nations, and its capital city is Juba. And yeah, it's one of the fastest growing cities in
And
Africa
it
after
has 10
independence.
states.
Oh yeah, it has 10 states.
Yeah, just like Kenya has 47 counties, South
Counties.
Sudan
Oh
has
wow.
South Sudan has
Uh-huh.
like 10 states
Uh-huh.
and 3 administrative areas. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yes.
Yeah.
And also it has like some of the tallest people in the world.
Tallest. We are
They
ranked the
get
best in
drafted in
basketball,
the
actually.
Yeah, I know they get drafted in the NBA. Like who was the recent draft? I've
I think
forgotten
it's
his
called
name.
this guy called Malwaj. It's called Malwaj.
Yes.
Some 19-year
Yeah, yeah,
old guy, like that boy. I think. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm. Oh yeah, he was trending just recently. And yeah, so Sudan has really beautiful people. They are thriving in modeling, They are the epitome of black is beauty.
Right.
Yeah, so those are like some really good and fun facts about South Sudan. So yes, I believe you've had a sip of water. Now we can continue.
Yes. I've
Oh
been
wow,
getting
oh
some
wow.
energy.
I think it was really needed. You've already told us a lot about South Sudan, and thank you for educating our viewers and listeners. What do you think is South Sudan's place in the African Union and the global community, especially since after it gained its independence?
Um, you know, um, I would say for a country to be so much recognized on the international space,
Mm-hmm,
it has to have people contributing on the international stage, right?
mm-hmm,
And just like let's look at Kenya for instance. I won't take you far, but let's look at Kenya. Like
Mhm.
Kenya is so much known right now because Kenya has like so many people contributing on international stage. We have like very prominent journalists like in all this international like mainstream media. We have Kenyans who are serving as CEOs in so big like multi I mean, how do you call it, multi what companies. We do have them,
Mhm.
like there's so many. So right now, if I'm to rate this, I mean, South Sudan position on the international stage is that it's not so much it doesn't really have so much impact because just like as I said, that we had like a very, very um, low literacy rate, and that was
Yeah.
because of the legacy of colonialization that happened,
Mhm.
where there was not really like some base. I mean, emphasis put on educating South Sudanese. And for that reason, even after independence, there are not so many people who are educated, produce, who would contribute so much on the international stage. So
Mhm.
the country right now really doesn't have so much impact because it has less people contributing on international stage. If we
Mhm.
had
Mhm.
that, these people, when they go outside there, they will be recognized or noticed uh, uh, based on the country that they come from. And when they contribute positively, it gives
Mhm.
like the pride goes back to the country where they come from, and that's where the countries easily get noticed. I'll give you an
Mhm.
example. There's one prominent Kenyan journalist who works with CNN, Larry. Larry,
Yeah.
like Larry, it's
Mhm.
doing great. And even there's one also called what is his name? He used to work for Citizen TV. He's called I
Wahiga.
forgot his Wahiga Maura, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's some kind of that, yeah. But these guys, like, they're really doing great. They are doing, even in like in marathon, they're doing great, like
Mhm.
doing a very, very, very great thing. So I feel for a country to have an influence, to have an impact on international stage, it has to produce people who have the capacity to go and serve on this international stage. When South Sudan reach an extent where maybe the next chairperson of the African Union happens to come from South Sudan, when it
Mhm.
reach an extent where the next chairperson of the maybe the assembly, the General Assembly, happens to come from South Sudan, or the one that leads one of the UN bodies comes from South Sudan, this country become easily noticeable to people. But
Mhm.
uh, until we send people of this caliber to go and serve in the international stage, we have no influence on the international stage, I would say. So
Mhm.
yes,
Mhm.
but as I said, that there is so much for South Sudan. There are already so many people out there who are on the right path. They're pursuing education, and South Sudanese are some of the bright people in the continent. That's what I would say. They have like very
Yes.
bright people,
Mhm.
and I just have a hope that one day the citizens from this country will actually have that capacity to go and serve in these international stages, and they can also take the name of the country, right? But at this
Mm.
point, there's not so much influence from South Sudan. Even within the
Mm.
regions, there's not so much influence because
Mhm.
we don't really produce people who are capable. I'm not saying that there are no people who are capable. We do have people who are capable, but they are not given the opportunity to actually showcase their ability to serve in this.
Mhm.
So it
Mhm.
also it depends on what government is there to give platform to these people to come out so that they can easily be noticed by the world out there. Yeah. But at this time, there's not so much influence.
Mm. Makes sense. Honestly, I wouldn't blame people from South Sudan because, as you said, you were already at some point like marginalized. There was no access to education, no access to these opportunities. So it will definitely take time. But I feel like the next generation leaders are the young people of South Sudan. There is hope, and I feel like people like you, Patrick, and all these young people who are doing amazing things on the ground, you're already setting a stage. You're setting a stage for what your futures would look like as people from South Sudan. And change, in as much as change takes time, you will definitely get there. And speaking of young people, I in my network, I have a couple of people I know from South Sudan who are doing amazing things, whether it's in the refugee camps in the country. I feel like with young people there is a hope of sort of rebuilding because of the way they are not afraid of taking risks, whether it's from an education point of view. Like for you, for example, you took that risk. You talked about your journey from from war to Canada and all that, the way you've taken the steps to get an education that would definitely change your life and that of your community. Other people are starting businesses, other people are starting non-governmental organizations, and also helping like people who still live at the camps. Like for example, Patrick also talked about his journey starting Sesi and the impact it has had and what he's doing for young people. I feel like it might take time, but already for you guys, you've, especially the young people of South Sudan, you've already set something in motion. And we might not feel the exact impact immediately, but 10 years from now, the stage has been set. 10 years from now, you will be talking about a totally different outlook for for South Sudan, in whether it's in a community setting or in in a global stage, will have more representation. So I think for me, I would say it's just for you guys to to keep going. That's what it takes to have that hope and to rebuild and to keep looking for these opportunities and to educate the people and your communities. Wow, that's important. So, I feel like a lot of times when we talk about countries or maybe communities, it's very easy. And I feel like the other day I was on TikTok, I came across this video. Somebody was trying to dissect the history of Kenya. And I feel like even our own history books, most of them were not necessarily written by us, the people of Kenya, for example. They have like more about a bit of colonial influence. What do you think is the importance of the people of South Sudan telling their own stories in their own voices and in their own points of view? How does that shape what the future looks like for people from South Sudan?
I think it's not even about the story of South Sudan, but I feel
Mm-hmm.
it's important to have um, a curricula in general that actually
Mm-hmm.
serve the interests of the country. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel we should have a curricula that focuses so much on our history,
Mm-hmm.
and history of a country is very very important. If we have it written in a way that is so biased, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to impact the generation for eternity. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when we do have countries that uh, are like multi-ethnic countries. Like for instance, we do have countries like Kenya. We have countries South Sudan. Majority of African countries, they have like so many ethnic groups. So if we
Mm-hmm.
have a history of a country with so many ethnic groups written in a most biased way that actually um, that tells or that try to diminish the rest of the other communities or ethnic communities, you feel that this will go down into history, and the generations that will come will keep on learning this history, and this history will keep on creating bigger problem in this country. So I feel like it is good, especially when you realize that you have a diverse country. It is good to actually write a history that respects diversity, that respects the
Mm-hmm.
diversity of country. It is good to have an education system or a curricula that actually can train people on how to solve a problem within their own country.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to do that. You shouldn't just be focusing so much on history that is written by other people, by colonialists,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like the colonialists were so much biased in so many ways. So the history
Mm-hmm.
that they wrote, uh, it was biased, and therefore the best way that we can do is that we need to rewrite our history, and it should be
Mhm.
rewritten in a way that values the existence of every ethnic group, that values the contributions that these communities or these ethnic groups have actually made throughout history. And
Mhm.
when we do that, people get to learn about it. The generations that come after us, they get to know that, okay, um, this ethnic group is not less important. They equally contributed
Mhm.
towards the progress
Mhm.
of this country. They
Yeah.
equally contributed towards the liberation of this country. But if we have a history that is so biased, which actually gives so much credit to a particular ethnic group, neglecting the rest, so the people that will come after us will keep on learning that history, and that will actually deepen uh, uh, ethnic problems within the country, which is so bad. So it
Mhm.
is high time we have to, I mean, we rewrite our history in a way that is so balanced and unbiased. That is
Mhm.
a very,
Mhm.
very important thing, and I feel that the history of South Sudan, honestly, needs to be rewritten. We need to really look into it so deeply, so that the people that will come after us will know that the country that is existing today, it is as a result of every contribution that each and every member of community actually participated in. But if we have
Mhm.
a history that is so biased, then we will never have a country that will value all ethnic groups. That is a very important, and it's not about history only. Talking about the whole curricula of the
Mhm.
whole education system. There's need for the education system to be revamped, so that
Okay.
it gives value to the country. It creates people who are thinkers, people who are innovators, people who are peace builders, people who can go and just like solve problems in the most amicable way that does not
Mhm.
result
Mhm.
into creating more conflict. I feel that is the way that uh, the education system or the history needs to be reformed. Right.
Mm. Now that reminds me that in another episode you talked about the education system in South Sudan and Uganda.
Uganda.
You
Actually,
were trending
maybe
on our
a
TikTok.
disclaimer. I know I went through that video and a lot of comments. So many people were
Uh-huh.
saying that the education system of Uganda is more better than. Yes, of course, I clearly understand that. I clearly,
Mhm.
but I was comparing that the two education system in the context. I mean, with the Canadian system or with the education
Yeah.
system that I'm in right now.
Mhm.
Of course,
Mhm.
in Uganda is a kind of like somewhere ahead of South Sudan in terms of it. That's why we do have
Mm.
so many South Sudanese going to study in Uganda, but we have sometimes no Ugandans going to study in South Sudan. It's because the education system of Uganda is way better than the one of South Sudan, but still, it's not the best, right? It's it's
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
still not the best.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't focus on creating the people who can solve the problem that the countries are dealing with, and that's that's
Mhm.
that's the
Mhm.
basis on which I was giving that. Keeps on only training people on passing examination, and that was all. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Going back to that issue of creating a curriculum and also the whole storytelling about communities being involved, I would like probably to challenge you and other young people from South Sudan to take up that. Um, and especially because I feel like we live in a bit of a totally different time where we can document our own stories. So maybe it's time for young people to take up that space and document as much as possible, because I believe you want this to be something that your children, your grandchildren could look back and they'll be like, yeah, at least our stories or the story of our country was told in a lens that reflects what we stand for, or what is true and what is factual. Yeah, but
Right.
definitely when it comes to education, let's I think with every country, the most basic things are usually like education, health, and having like a proper infrastructure. Do you think at the moment South Sudan is making any progress, especially with the three?
Um. I think you know I wouldn't have I would have given the best answer if I'm right now back home, because
Mm-hmm.
what I see on social media might not be like
Mm.
like what I would say the definite uh,
A
definition, I
true
mean, of what is
reflection.
in existence is on ground. Because
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I the last time I was in South Sudan was in 2016,
oh
so
wow. Mm-hmm,
nearly 10 years now. So
mm-hmm,
and I feel that yeah, there could be some kind of a lot of maybe new infrastructures being built, and health facilities, but also education. But yes,
mm-hmm,
from stories that I read on social media and news and all these, it looks like, we still grapple so much with our education system, and that it's not fixed.
mm-hmm,
Sometimes it takes months even to mark, like, to come up with the with the results of the national examination. Sometimes it comes like 2 months, 3 months late,
oh
and
wow.
it's just that. So that tells us of how weak the system is sometimes. So
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
think there's really so much that needs to be done, even like in all sectors regarding education, health, and infrastructure wise. I think there's so
mm-hmm,
much that needs to be done in the country. And then but also, a country can't just develop like its own infrastructures by itself, and this
mm-hmm,
needs like investors to come into the country. And the only way for investors to come in, when they are rest assured that when they come and invest their businesses there is hope that there's no destruction going to happen, and that
mm-hmm,
calls for peace. When there's
mm-hmm,
peace in a country, it attracts investors to come in that very country. So I think there are priorities that the South Sudan government needs to put in its preference list, in its top list, and one of it is peace. When there is
mm-hmm,
peace, it
mm-hmm.
opens ways for so many things. We'll
That's
have
true.
investors. Some of the health facilities that are built in countries are not even built by the government. We do have some private health sectors that are built by these big private individuals. So, and there's no one who wants to build those big buildings for health when they know
Mm-hmm,
there is no hope for peace in this country. So they can only do
mm-hmm,
that when the government assures them that there's not going to be any war anymore. So I think the earlier the government do that, the better for the country. So the government needs to focus so much on restoration of peace in the country, and that would open ways for so many things, including infrastructures development, and also development in the health sector, but also in education.
yeah, so I think what you're saying is peace will become the firm foundation that South Sudan can grow on, and it will be important going forward. That's good. That's really good.
Exactly.
What are the misconceptions you think people have about your country?
Misconceptions about South Sudan is that
Mhm.
uh, they are very rich.
I swear it's true. Are you rich? Or because even here in Kenya, I have
My
seen
sister
people
lives.
come
My sister lives in Nairobi, as I said,
and
and there's always these kind of thing when they go. I
Mhm,
think recently they moved to a new building,
mhm,
and the way how they were charged was different from way how other people were charged. That's
that's
one.
true.
And my friend
Mhm,
always tells me, like, she has like some Kenyan friends who sometimes ask, "Hey, well, are you rich? What?" It's like, and she doesn't even have like a bob in her pocket money. She doesn't have that. Where would you got it? Like, she doesn't have the money. And that even
mhm,
happens the same when I was in Uganda. When we
mhm,
go to the market, and when in most cases, it's easy for these Ugandans to notice that you're a South Sudanese. And
mm.
from the look, most of us are
Yeah,
too tall, when they are tall and dark skin, and
you stand
and
out.
also they speak, like, when they speak in English, they easily notice that this is South Sudanese. And you find that they will charge
Mhm,
you like for like the little things that, and by so much really. From experience, I was in Uganda in December last year. So I
mhm,
went in December. I was buying some little item, just
mhm,
like, what was that? I think it was a gift bag, like a
mhm,
gift bag. So apparently, I heard from someone that gift bar was supposed to be for 7,000 shillings. Okay,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
7,000.
Mhm.
But the guy saw me, and then he was speaking to me in Luganda, but I couldn't speak. And then he was like, because I don't know Luganda, I just speak in English. And I was like, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "I'm from South Sudan." I didn't know that that was a trick he was going to use to charge me.
Oh,
So he asked me
oh.
that because I told him I'm South Sudanese. So the guy gave me that back at a double price. He was saying like 14,000.
What?
14,000, and
Oh.
because I didn't know the actual price for those things in Kampala, so I had to pay for it. But when I came home, a friend of mine told me that that bag is sold at 6,000. Like you could even buy it at 6 or 5,000. I was like, this guy.
Oh.
Yeah, so people have that misconception that
Mhm.
South Sudanese are very rich. They like spending money anyhow, and that might
Mhm.
happen. I'm told like in Nairobi, you'd see some of the best cars are driven by South Sudanese. Like they have SSD number plates on the streets of
Mhm.
Nairobi, Kampala. You
Yes.
know,
Mhm.
it's not that we are rich. We are not rich. We are just extravagant. That's what I would say.
In Kenya, would say the Luo in you. You know, even Luos in Kenya are associated with being like really poshy. They
Yeah,
spend and spend.
right. Yeah, I think we're just extravagant. We are not rich.
Mhm, mhm. Ah,
Yeah.
interesting. But that
So we,
that thing about rent, it's true. In Kenya, you will be charged more if you are South Sudanese.
yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
That's true. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, wow,
So
wow. Okay.
so some of them it. Right.
Wow. So what would you like the rest of Africa and the world to understand better about South Sudan?
I think we're just a young country,
Mm-hmm.
and just like any of I mean, most of the African countries started there. When we get back into their road to independence, they
Mm-hmm.
went through all the stages that South Sudan went through. You know, uh, even in Kenya, I guess like immediately after independence, was it in 1962, 1963? Uh,
Yeah, 63.
uh, I think
Mm-hmm.
1963, you'd see that immediately after the independence, the country was still struggling with some few things, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there are a few things that the country was struggling. That was the same case with Uganda, with all the other African countries. So the stage that South Sudan is in right now is not just like a bad stage, but that is a stage that all the other African countries went through. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll ultimately get to a stage where we'll be in line with most of the other countries. So it's just a
Mm-hmm.
matter of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the stage that we're in, it is a part of development of any country that you will have to
Mm-hmm.
go through that stage, figure out the problem with that situation, and have to change things, flip things around, and get the better way. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we are not just known for conflict. We have some of the peace loving people in the country, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
very good people, and yeah, very resilient, and they're just good people. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
many of you attribute South Sudan for being like arrogant. Yeah, there are some of us who are very arrogant, and just like in
Mm-hmm.
any country, so many other people are arrogant as well. So these are
Mm-hmm.
just a few. Yeah. uh these are some of the things that I need people to know about South Sudan. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting,
Mhm.
interesting. So, as we wind up the episode, what gives you the most hope for South Sudan's future?
The most thing that gives me hope is the young people of South
Mm-hmm.
Sudan. You know, um, they are like doing things in a different way. Um, you know, right now at this
Mm-hmm.
stage of mine, I do have friends almost from all the tribes in South Sudan, nearly all the tribes in South Sudan. And
Mm-hmm.
from my interaction with them, the way how they actually um, look at things gives me hope that uh, very soon we'll have a generation of South Sudanese who will actually uh, want the better for their own country. They wouldn't be thriving so much on tribalism, on conflict, but they
Mm-hmm.
always do the best for their country. So when I see people like in my cycle, when I see my friends, when I see The South Sudanese who go to school, who are so much passionate about pursuing their studies and doing some of the
Mm-hmm.
best programs out there, it just gives me hope that one day we will have a country where the young people will be the custodian of their future. They will be the one, and they will redefine uh, uh, everything about the country, and that
Mm-hmm.
hopes, and that hope is everywhere. I see it on social media, I see it on through my friend, I see it, just it's written everywhere. We have people in that kind, I mean, of that kind. So that
Mm-hmm.
is my only hope. My only hope is in the young people of South Sudan, who I have a very strong belief that are going to change everything about the country.
Wow. Yes, the future is in the young people. Your parting shot? What's your parting shot?
uh, I think I would be so mean if I would not wish happy independence anniversary to my fellow countrymen. I mean, my fellow South Sudanese. We are
Mm-hmm.
14 years old. Very exciting. This is a journey. But I feel that the most important thing about this day is that we should just reflect on the reason why we sought for independence, why we fought for independence. We fought for independence so that we'll be a sovereign country. We will be the one running our own affairs. We'll be the one solving our own issues in case we have problem. We wouldn't go back to war. We'll send our kids back to school. Our kids will grow
Mm-hmm.
at home. They wouldn't go to their neighboring country. I mean, to the neighboring countries, or grow in the refugee camps. These were some of the reasons why those who liberated this country pick up arms and went and fought against
Mm-hmm.
uh, the oppressors. So I think when we see these things happening today, even when we are already an independent state, I think we should ask ourselves so many questions. How far have we moved away from the objective of the struggle? So these are some of it is a moment to reflect on it. It shouldn't just be a moment of celebration, but it should be a
Mm-hmm.
moment of reflection. And we should reflect so much on why our founding fathers pick up arms and went and fought against the oppressors. When we know about it, I think we can readjust ourselves and get back to on track. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Honestly, I don't have anything else to add. You have ended this episode very well. Thank you, Emmanuel, for lending your voice on the South Sudan issue as a South Sudanese yourself. It's been truly amazing to hear from your point of view what the road to independence has looked like for, an average South Sudan person or the people of South Sudan in general. And I think, as you said, it's important to reflect on the why you fought for independence and where you are at and what you want the future to look like for the future generations. So as also from me, I would like to say happy independence anniversary to South Sudanese nationals and all our supporters. And as we mark South Sudan's independence, let's remember that freedom isn't just about a flag. It's about dignity, identity, and the right to rebuild. Today, we honor the pain, the power, and the promise of South Sudan's people. Thank you for tuning in to the Spark It podcast. I've been your host, Helen Kimaru, joined by Emmanuel Taban of the Concerned podcast. Please follow him on all social media platforms. And also, let's keep the conversation going on our social media platforms. Leave us a comment on our socials and let us know what you actually know about South Sudan. And also, as a South Sudanese national, what stands out for your country and what would you want your country to look like in now and in the future. Thank you for tuning in, and it's been amazing. Until the next one, bye.
Bye. Hmm.